The might of Mother Nature, widespread damage as Storm Eunice strikes the UK. Nowhere escaped unscathed. 2 people were killed as record-breaking winds battered coastlines, cut off power to thousands and tore up trees.
Suddenly it came towards me and I thought it was going to kill me.
London's O2 had its roof ripped off by gusts topping 80 miles an hour. In Wales, all trains were cancelled and both 7 bridges closed for the first time ever as the storm churned in from the southwest. Heavy snow in Scotland and the northeast brought roads there to a standstill, while right across the country, those who stayed at home if they could as Eunice rendered travel too dangerous. And just one other story tonight, escalating tensions in Ukraine with Russian accusations and fears Putin's determined to justify war at any cost.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. Well, it is proving to be one of the worst storms in a generation. Storm Eunice has brought disruption and damage to almost all parts of the country. In the last half hour, it's been confirmed a woman in North London was killed after a tree fell on a carver. And a man in his 50s has died on Merseyside. It all comes at the end of a day when we've seen record gusts reported, key transport links suspended and schools and businesses forced to close. And as we come on air tonight, around 200,000 homes are still without power. Tonight, we have reporters right across Britain with the very latest. We'll be hearing how the country has fared against this very rare weather event. But first, let's go to our correspondent, Garrett Vincent in Devon tonight, one of the first places to feel the impact of today's storm. Garrett.
The force of this storm, Mary, has moved across the country today from west to east, but where I am right now on the North Devon coast, it's not quite finished yet. It felt like we're in a bit of a sandstorm this afternoon as the wind was still strong enough to lift the sand off the bay and throw it onto the land. The weather warnings have moved from red to amber throughout the course of the day, and people here are certainly hoping that that means that the storm has done its worst.
Storm Eunice crashed into the southwestern edges of the United Kingdom at around the time its people would have been going to work. Most of them had wisely chosen to stay at home. Some, though, ventured out onto the harbour walls to get a close look as the sea raged against the shore. Don't leave home unless you have to, was the advice from the emergency services. So the motorways near the coast at rush hour were unusually quiet, but on the M4 near Swansea, a frightening example of what can happen on the road in a storm. Keep watching the lorry. Luckily, its driver was unhurt. In the southwest of England, people filmed trees they'd been driving past for a lifetime being felled.
Oh my God, I caught that on video!
This one in Cornwall. And this one snapped in Wiltshire. In Somerset, even a church spire wasn't spared.
It fell off.
One man in Ireland was killed by a falling tree this morning, and a woman in Henley was badly injured by debris. Here in England's southwestern counties, though, survivors spoke of narrow escapes from trees coming down.
And suddenly it came towards me and I thought it was going to kill me. But instead it crashed and just hit the gate. And I thought, oh my God, my car is underneath it.
Journeys made by other means weren't easy.
Oh, sing right, sing right, sing right!
The skills of the pilots were tested by the wind at Heathrow. And train timetables which weren't cancelled completely were severely disrupted here in Banbury by a roof on the line. From the western coasts, Eunice roared across the breadth of the UK to London, a city so often spared the worst weather, where parts of the canopy which covers the O2 Arena were ripped away.
It's low tide here, but but you can see the waves crashing in for miles along this stretch of coastline. The sea's getting churned up, and that powerful wind just feels relentless.
That wind, and sometimes the walls it pushed over, made power supplies flicker and then fail completely. In this village in Devon, a candle-lit tea shop opened its doors to help families stuck in cold homes.
Not ideal, really, when they want something to eat and they want it now. So yeah, that's why we've come out, because they just can't heat anything up. Well, you nearly blew away just then, didn't you?
Yeah.
You tried to get in the car.
On the coasts where the storm arrived, the winds eased slightly but kept up. Throughout this long day, Eunice has held this land in its powerful grasp. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
Well, we woke up this morning to not one but two red weather warnings, upgraded since last night and meaning a danger to life. They covered coastal areas in the southwest, Bristol and South Wales, Suffolk and, for the first time, London. Winds reached a record-breaking 122 miles per hour at the Needles on the Isle of Wight, far higher than the 90 miles per hour expected. By mid-afternoon, that was downgraded to amber for most of England and Wales, but we're still expecting very high winds, possible power cuts, mobile phone outages and further travel disruption. And tonight, yellow warnings for snow, ice and wind are in place in northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. We're expecting more snow and major travel delays. So let's get more then on how things stand right now across the country. Chris Choi is in Southend-on-Sea, one of the areas that was covered by that rare red warning. And our West of England correspondent Rupert Evelyn is in Wootton-under-Edge. Rupert, starting with you, first of all, what's the latest from the southwest where you are?
Well, I think it's important, obviously, that we've covered what Storm Eunice brought, but also, in a sense, what didn't happen. And arguably, it was a relief that those severe flood warnings that threatened further upstream, up the Severn this morning, didn't come to pass, probably because Storm Eunice didn't quite time with the high tides. That will have been of a great relief to the Environment Agency. There is an awful lot of mopping up to do right now. A lot of that based around energy supply. Western Power Distribution, who cover the area from the Midlands through the southwestern parts of South Wales, have still tonight got around about 150,000 properties where they need to restore electricity. A lot of that will happen quite quickly, but some people may have to wait into tomorrow and maybe a little longer before the lights come back on.
And as the storm tracked eastward, it hit the south coast of England, and here in Southport, it hit with ferocity. 70-mile-an-hour winds and dangerously high waves way above the seawall. The pier and many of the attractions had to close, as indeed did the high street. When it comes to transport, the only word I can use is havoc. Down the coast, the Port of Dover closed with all cross-channel ferries suspended. The Greater Anglia train operator suspended services across its entire network. It said that staff had to take time to clear debris from the overhead electrical lines and had to extinguish fires from those lines, showing just how severe this storm became.
All right, Chris Choi in Southend and Rupert Evelyn in Gloucestershire, thank you. Well, from exposed coastal locations like Southend, where Chris was, to the capital now. And this morning, London awoke to its first ever red weather warning. Such high winds are rare in big built-up cities, leaving some landmarks, well, pretty ill-prepared, really, for the day's intense conditions. John Ray has this report.
It's been a day for some of lucky escapes, like the passengers of this bus that ploughed through the worst of the storm. But as emergency services declared a major incident alert across the capital, Eunice claimed its first life here. A woman killed in her car by a falling tree. London on red alert for the first time, and counting the cost tonight, the roof of the Millennium Dome, the O2 Concert Arena, shredded like the sails of a ship lost at sea.
There's a couple of trees down over there. but yeah, nothing like this. This is like history, isn't it, really? It's unbelievable.
The inside's exposed, the building evacuated, tonight's show's cancelled. It is a dramatic illustration of the power packed by Storm Eunice in a city which has so often in the past avoided the worst of the winter furies. No wonder so many Londoners have heeded the advice to stay home, to stay safe. Though home was no guarantee of sanctuary. In North London, a row of 5 houses with their roof slates scattered on the pavement below. While in Tottenham, tons of steel moved to the rhythm of the wind, a real-life stress test for the Spurs football stadium.
I'll wait as long as I have to.
For commuters, it was the limits of their patience tested. Trains in and out of the capital fell victim to trees blown across lines.
It's pretty rubbish. I have to get back tonight so that I can be very early in the morning, packed up to come up for a big event in the morning.
Those who did get home in one piece to homes also intact might count themselves fortunate. John Ray, ITV News.
Well, for much of the day, Wales has been virtually cut off from the rest of Britain as high winds forced the closure of both bridges over the River Severn estuary. It is the first time that both road crossings have been simultaneously shut. And rail services have also been suspended all day. Our correspondent Daniel Hewitt is in Cardiff tonight. So real serious travel disruption there, Daniel.
That's right, Mary. This is Wales' biggest train station, Cardiff Central. It is still closed tonight. Trains in and out of Wales are unlikely to start until at least tomorrow. It could be tomorrow afternoon, we're told. Today felt like the closest thing Wales has had to a lockdown since the pandemic. Schools were closed, plenty of shops were closed, and although Wales braced itself for this storm when it came, it made its presence felt.
For the first time in over a quarter of a century, Storm Eunice completely closed both Severn crossings in and out of Wales today. On a frantic Friday that saw all attempts to get in and out of the country almost entirely cut off. People were warned not to travel due to risk of life, and it was easy to see why. This lorry falling foul on the M4, blown over in the high winds. But the roads were the only option here, as all trains were cancelled, planes grounded too, the storm bringing parts of Wales to a standstill.
This is likely to go on until tomorrow. A start of service tomorrow will mean us having to check and assess over 1,000 miles of railway track.
There's a roof just gone. Look at that. Oh my God. Oh.
The owner of this caravan in Swansea wasn't the only one to lose his roof.
This is unbelievable. I got to get from you.
The top of this sports centre in Cardiff was also ripped off. Across Wales, around 40,000 properties lost power at Eunice's peak, and all schools sensibly shut their doors. But it was on the coast where the storm showed its strength, powerfully pinning back those attempting to press on regardless.
Well, it's just gone 12 o'clock here. The storm was meant to be slowing down by now, but as you can see, it really isn't. Here on the South Wales coast, storms have reached up to 87 miles an hour. On the whole, people are heeding the warnings to stay indoors.
By late afternoon, Wales was assessing the damage. The M4 bridge crossing is reopened tonight, but disruption is likely to linger as the clean-up gets underway. Daniel Hewitt, ITV News, Cardiff.
Amazing pictures, aren't they? Well, sticking with travel cancellations and delays, planes, trains and traffic on the roads were also badly affected in the north of England. And Yasmin Bottleby is at Manchester Airport. Yasmin, what can you tell us?
Well, Mary, we saw those planes, didn't we, in the more southern airports struggling to land. A few of those were actually diverted to here earlier on to Manchester Airport. Even so, the weather here has been ferocious. The winds have been strong. We're in a bit of a hailstorm at the moment. And just in the last few moments, we've seen a couple of planes having a few goes at trying to land. 10% of flights at Manchester Airport were cancelled today. Train travel has been a bit of a mess across the northwest. Avanti West Coast services completely cancelled. Trains on overhead wires blocking some routes, and Preston Station closed because bits of its roof have blown off. Up in the northeast, it was more about the snow than it was the wind that was blocking the roads. Gritters and snowplows have been out in force. And if you think that once this storm has passed that all of the travel disruption will stop, think again. Trains and staff members all waking up in the wrong place tomorrow, and Manchester Airport saying it's expected to be particularly busy after all of the disruption today.
All right, Yasmin Borobai at Manchester Airport, thank you. And we will have more on this brutal weather still to come. The ITV Evening News. Heavy snow in Scotland and the northeast as Eunice causes damage and chaos there too. And we will have the very latest after the break. Stay with us. Back. Storm Eunice has brought a blanket of heavy snow right across the central belt of Scotland and parts of northern England. It is the second named storm there in just a week, coming 2 days as it has after the disruption of Storm Dudley. Now, conditions have been described as treacherous there, as our correspondent Lucy Watson now reports.
When it came thick and fast. As we drove, visibility was near impossible.
The road bends round to the right.
So many roads becoming impassable.
No, I know, I was going up.
Sadie Wilson has lived in Banchory for 75 years. She's used to bad weather here, but today's snow was unusual.
This is sort of more than we're used to at the moment. But I've got in loads of logs, and I've filled a couple of flasks just in case, and I've got 2 wood burners. So I'm fine and dandy.
But the cavalry was out in the Cairngorms, snowplows trying to clear a path for the morning commute. In Concert, County Durham, cars struggled to get a grip. Others in Teesdale spun out of control.
A bit of a shock, yeah. Well, basically just lost control of the car coming around the corner, just fishtailed and...
For a time, the road connecting County Durham with Cumbria was closed completely. A whiteout for many. As the winds picked up in parts of Aberdeenshire, the snow gates were closed to stop anyone venturing any further. And more than 40 schools were closed in this county alone, with good reason.
More than 20 centimetres of snow is expected to fall on high ground, around 5 centimetres lower down. But Storm Eunice's high winds on the hills bring with them the potential for avalanches.
The threat of the storm still remains, but it is a picture-perfect scene where many are counting their blessings. Lucy Watson, ITV News, Aberdeenshire.
And you can see more on Storm Eunice on our on itv.com/news. Now looking on to other news now, and there has been a major escalation in Russia's standoff with the West. Vladimir Putin today accused Ukraine of human rights abuses, but that follows US warnings that Moscow may be looking to manufacture a pretext for war. And it came as Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine said that they would start evacuating their civilians. Our global security editor Rohit Kachru reports.
The sound of the siren was a signal to leave. In Donetsk, a city held by Russian-backed rebels, a mass evacuation is underway this evening. All the people are leaving the city, says the driver. Women, children and the elderly first in the queue. The Russian government had helped to arrange their accommodation. The separatist leader, supported by Moscow, swapped his usual shiny suit for military uniform to order the mass evacuation. Residents needed to flee to Russia, he said, because Ukrainian forces planned to attack. But then, in the same city, an explosion, a car bomb. Ukraine says this was all theatre, a series of events staged by Russia to cast it as the aggressor and create an excuse for a war.
Everything that we're seeing, including what you've described in the last 24, 48 hours, is part of a scenario that is already in play of creating false provocations, of then having to respond to those provocations and then ultimately committing new aggression against Ukraine.
President Putin rejected all that this afternoon, but today's events do reflect the Kremlin script anticipated by some Western governments, a series of escalating events with Russia blaming Ukraine. The American government has said again that an invasion could happen within days, but they've been saying that for 8 days now. However, Western officials consider the events of today to be ominous, with one saying the prospects for a solution are not looking great. Rohit Khatri, ITV News, Kyiv.
And so before we go, let's return tonight to our main story on a day that has reminded us all, in case we needed it, of the sheer power of nature. We were warned Storm Eunice would be a once-in-a-generation storm, so we hope it will prove to be. Starting in the West Country and sweeping across Britain, it knocked out the power to tens of thousands of homes and left at least 2 people dead. Roads and railways were brought to a standstill as trees were felled and roofs ripped off buildings, with warnings that things may not improve for some time. While in London, the iconic O2 Arena bore the brunt of some of the strongest winds ever to hit the city. Its very fabric ripped to shreds. And that is all for now. Raggy will be here with the latest at 10:20. A full weather forecast is coming up. But from me and all the team around the country, bye-bye.
Visibility may be low this evening as the cold weather hits. Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.
Hello there, very good evening to you. As you've just been hearing, Storm Eunice has roared across the UK today. As expected, the strongest winds have now passed, but we still have a legacy of weather warnings across the UK. Towards the south, strong wind still for another couple of hours. Towards the north, it's the ice that we're worried about. And let's see the scores on the boards. As you can see, it has been a very significant weather event, and we have a new record for England, and that's a gust of 122 miles an hour recorded at the Needles of the Isle of Wight. It'll certainly go down as one of the most significant storms, certainly in the last 10 years. And we can stick with the fairly wild conditions, I think, over the next few days. Just to be clear, it'll be nothing like as wild as we've seen today, but even so, very unsettled indeed. Eunice pulling away, but the doors to the Atlantic are now fully open. And just look at these warning areas popping on and off over the next few days as we've got those systems coming in from the Atlantic, giving at times very wet conditions. Also pretty windy, as I say, nothing like today, but pretty windy conditions as well. And this wind warning here, in fact, lasts all the way until Monday lunchtime. So it's just worth being aware and staying up to date with the latest forecasts. Looking ahead to this evening and overnight, things slowly starting to come down, although it does remain a windy night. And as I say, the risk of ice towards the north. Brightness, though, as we start the day tomorrow. And then the next set of systems starts moving in from the west. A weather warning here for wind towards the south and a lot of rain as well, with snow on its leading edge. And again, it continues to be blustery for everyone. Have a lovely weekend.
Heinz Soups sponsors ITV National Weather.